Thank you for coming. That's the program. I'm always in charge of the weather for special events that I have to speak at, and as you see, it came through again. I have a special link up there. But anyway, it's nice to see you all out here, more than I anticipated. Hello. You've heard the story, what goes around comes around. And I've got a little story I want to tell. I'm not going to ruin the next speaker's part of his talk, but back in 1960s, there was Hutchison Sewing Center over here, and that burned down in 1965. Now, if you look around, every other building down here, the dark red buildings, when they burned down, they sat as a vacant parking lot. That's all there was. And there was Bee's Tavern, the Green Onion. The Green Onion back then, Linda Hopkins spent her whole life there. Were you in the back room with the bands too? I've heard stories. Anyway, that building was, my favorite building, was completely boarded up. All the windows were boarded up and down. The whole building was painted an obnoxious green color. So what happened when Gene Mitchell started this process, those vacant lots are now buildings. And it's been a real great thing for downtown. I believe the square has been, when this started and everybody else started doing their thing, and a lot of things got renovated because of what happened here. And we have Mitchell and Company to thank for that. But anyway, what comes around is that for the last 5 years, Paul's son, Doug, has been the mayor of Fort Collins and has another year left on his 10-year term. So now it's a pleasure to introduce the mayor of Fort Collins, Doug Hutchison.
Well, good morning. A beautiful, beautiful day and a very special event. I want to thank everyone for joining us at this special ceremony that honors the founders and the visionaries of Old Town Square on this special 25th anniversary. Surrounding us today are award-winning buildings, beautiful award-winning alleyways, and stunning public artworks. Architects locally tell me that downtown Fort Collins has some of the best original examples of prairie architecture in the United States. Absolutely. And in fact, Walt Disney sent his engineers and architects when he was building Disneyland in the 60s, and Main Street USA is modeled, at least partly, on what downtown Fort Collins architecture is and has been. And as many of you know, this was not always this nice. When the first mall came to Fort Collins almost 50 years ago now, a group of businessmen formed the Downtown Merchants Association. That was the enabler and the great-granddaddy of today's Downtown Development Authority and Downtown Business Association. And their vision in a changing world was to save our downtown and turn it into a robust gathering place for people. A place that would have healthy businesses and that would be the crown jewel of our community. And I'm really proud, and thanks, Ed, for the recognition, that my father, Paul Hutchison, was among those original visionary leaders. And I know he'd be thrilled to see the continuing accomplishments of our founders and the continued commitment to maintaining Old Town's excellence by today's business leaders. And as Ed pointed out, in the 1950s and 1960s, that corner right there was the 1880s rolling building, and it was Hutchison Furniture and Sporting Goods, and then as the 60s, entering the 60s, he leased out the other half of the building and had his original interest sewing machine store. And that did burn down, struck by lightning in 1965, which was a terrible year for Fort Collins. That was also the year of the State Dry Goods burning down. But there's a lot of great memories down here, a lot of great memories for me. This was when I was in junior high and high school, etc. This Linden Street was, of course, a street and not a gathering place. And that's what we're celebrating today, was that fundamental change. And by the way, in those days, there was not a single tree in downtown Fort Collins. So a lot of really good things have happened here. Because of the foresight and the planning by so many that are here today, Fort Collins, and specifically Old Town, has endured and has retained a special quality that's been imitated by others but true to its original purpose, it remains that crown jewel, that heart of our community. This time I'd like to acknowledge and thank the City Council who approved the financing for the project and saw it through to completion. And if you're here, and I haven't seen who all is here or not at this point, if you're here, please stand up and be recognized. Gary Castle, John Clark, William Elliott, Jerry Horrock, John Konezovich, I know John's here, and Kelly Olson, who serves today as Mayor Pro Tem, and by the way, 25 years ago was also Mayor Pro Tem, so it's very interesting history there. Peggy Reeves, Barbara Rutstein, Ed Stoner, and Ellery Wilmart. And please express our appreciation for what they have done for Fort Collins. I'd like to recognize the current City Council members that are here as well. I know Wade Troxel's here, Ben Manville is here. I didn't see who else. Kelly Olson, of course, the Mayor Pro Tem is here. I did see some elected officials. We're delighted Randy Fisher showed up, and Steve Johnson, and Lou Gator is here from the County Commissioners, and if there's others that I missed, we appreciate you being here. And we also need to thank, and the Coloradoan did some of it in their editorial today, some of the developers that went through this colorful, creative process that happened here, and that include Gene Mitchell, and even include one of my old classmates, Ray Dixon. These leaders and so many others over the years truly embraced their obligation and their privilege to envision our future and to prepare for it and to make it happening. In looking over some old newspaper articles from the time of the ribbon cutting ceremony originally, 25 years ago in this very spot, an interesting quote caught my eye. Quote, "Old Town Square, that vast and delicate blend of our city's past and future, didn't come cheap or without risks. The gamblers who made it happen could have put their money in franchised hamburger stands and surefire formulas, but they gambled on us instead in a big way," end quote. And we have truly benefited in Fort Collins. The downtown area continues to be a vibrant and a uniquely authentic district. And within the next few years, the Mason Corridor will be another way that people arrive at Old Town Square through the North Transit Center and through the new bus rapid transit system. The new Fort Collins Museum and Discovery Science Center will be located within a half mile of this location. And Fort Collins is on the leading edge of the new energy economy, utilizing smart grid technology developed at Colorado State University and applying it to Fort Zed, which will encompass downtown and Old Town Square. Fort Collins is very fortunate to have so many innovative thinkers and risk takers willing to think boldly and to take on truly legacy projects like Old Town Square. And our Old Town Downtown District, by the way, was one of the primary reasons why Money Magazine named Fort Collins, Colorado the best place to live in America. Thank you again for coming for this special day, and thanks to those people who were unable to attend. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your persistence. Thank you for your dedication to the improvement of our downtown area and Fort Collins itself. Our community is going to enjoy Old Town Square for many years to come. Thank you so much.
Mayor's comments remind me of college days. And I forgot about the Red Garter over here. But one of my fondest memories, of course, Red Garter is a very popular watering hole with the students. And I happened to be a student at the time. The thing I recall most is when they tried to break up the crowds and they come and try to arrest you. And of course, I have a nickname that really helps because I was running down through those back alleys and they never did get me. Every year. Yep. So, what's that? Yeah, that's never happened. Still proud of it. Anyway, it's now my pleasure to introduce our DDA director, executive director. Matt was the project chairman, project manager for 3 years under Chip, and then he became, in January of 2009, he became the executive director of the Downtown Development Authority, and we couldn't have made a better choice. Chip. Matt Romanoff.
Thanks, Ed. It doesn't get any more Fort Collins than this. Blue sky, sunshine, smell of fresh beer wafting from Cooper Smith's around the corner. Today marks a celebration honoring the founders of the Downtown Development Authority who envisioned a revitalized central business district, the city officials who partnered with them, and the visionaries and entrepreneurs who dreamed and built Old Town Square. It is a tribute to the many people who had a dream of building an inspirational community gathering space. Fort Collins is today nationally recognized as one of the best places to live, among the best places to do business, and to retire and enjoy the out of doors because of the work done by many years ago by the people we are honoring today. Recognizing the work that had gone before, Mr. Art March Jr., one of the founders and planners of the Downtown Development Authority, wrote, and I quote, "Unless people are attracted by what we do, our efforts and expenditures will ultimately fail." In July 1981, the Fort Collins City Council approved the formation of the Downtown Development Authority. Soon after, Mr. Gene Mitchell approached the DDA with a plan, and what a plan it was, grand and ambitious, even by today's measure. It called for the closing of Linden Street to traffic, the raising of 5 dilapidated buildings, replacing them with this community's earliest examples of urban infill, and rehabilitating 7 historic structures. As Mr. Mitchell wrote in a letter to Bill Kingsbury, then executive director of the DDA, I quote, "The concept of the Old Town Project is to construct an entertainment, arts, and culture-oriented living center within the charming and enticing ambiance of historic Fort Collins. Alleys will be turned into inviting explorations. Interesting vistas and invitations to stop, shop, and enjoy will be created. An attractive open central area will provide for a wide range of people-oriented activities, from noontime brown bagging to street dancing. We plan a unique community that is always alive, a place you will want to go often, and to which you will always take your out-of-town guests, and to which tourists and visitors will come in much greater numbers. A catalyst from which the revitalization of downtown Fort Collins will take off." Partnering with Mr. Ray Dixon, Gene Mitchell formed Old Town Associates to implement the plan. They purchased 12 buildings in what is now Old Town Square and began the arduous work of transformation. They were joined in these efforts by many others, including Matzik Construction, Mr. Jim Reedhead, and a team of architects, planners, and landscape designers. With financial partnership assistance from the DDA and others, and continued support from the City of Fort Collins, the square was dedicated on May 31st, 1985. The dreams of these visionaries, entrepreneurs, and their dedicated supporters have stood the test of time, and by any measure, have been a fantastic success. Downtown Fort Collins and Old Town Square are truly the heart of our community and stand as a tribute to the many people, too numerous to mention, who had a dream of building this incredible community gathering space. From the business owners who watched from across the street and endured much inconvenience and construction dust, to the merchants who first occupied the new shops in the square. We offer this day as a tribute to developers, architects, and designers who built the vision, to the founders of the DDA who dreamed the vision, and to those city officials who supported and promoted the vision. An extension to the DDA enabling legislation was signed into state law in Old Town Square by Governor Ritter exactly 2 years ago today, extending the life of the DDA until 2031. This allows the Fort Collins DDA to continue the mission to revitalize downtown by continuing to make positive, wise investments that contribute to the vitality and vibrancy of the Fort Collins Central Business District. Today, I thank City Manager Darren Atterbury and his staff for continued support and partnership, and also to our partner organizations, David Short and the Downtown Business Association, and Ryan Kiefer and the Beat Street staff for efforts in keeping downtown Fort Collins vibrant and keeping Old Town Square packed year-round with activities for the enjoyment of our community. This occasion today must seem like a family reunion for many of you, reuniting with people you may not have seen for a very long time, and reacquainting with friends and former colleagues. Please enjoy your day, enjoy your visit to Old Town Square, and most important, as a representative of the new generation of downtown leaders, I want to extend our sincerest appreciation to all of you for passionately pursuing a vision, for building it, and for being here to look back upon it 1/4 century later to to see the dynamic and very real impact it has imparted on this wonderful community. Thank you all.
Thanks, Chip. It's now my pleasure to introduce James Tonsil, who is the regional representative for Senator Michael Bennett, who's here to make a presentation to the city.
Hi. As a longtime city resident, it's my pleasure to deliver some remarks on behalf of the senator, who unfortunately couldn't be here today and sends his regrets. Our office used to be, our regional office used to be right down here in Old Town Square. And a lot of people still think that we're down here. Apparently they didn't get the memo that we have moved a little bit further south. But certainly we are still here in town, and certainly in Old Town Square in heart. I'm just going to read a letter on behalf of the senator to Mayor Hutchinson, founders and guests. Thank you for inviting me to take part in the Founders Day ceremony in beautiful Old Town Fort Collins. Although I cannot join this celebration in person, I send my heartfelt congratulations on the 25th anniversary of Old Town Square to past and present city leaders, the Downtown Development Authority, the Downtown Business Association, and to all the visionaries who had the foresight and determination to transform Old Town Square from an idea into a reality. Last July, on one of my many visits to Fort Collins, my family and I had the pleasure of spending the evening in Old Town on First Friday, and we were impressed by the welcoming atmosphere and unique personality of the square and greater Old Town. Actually, he told me he wants to move here. I'm not kidding. He told me that the next day. You have created something wonderful here in the heart of the community, a one-of-a-kind destination for city residents and visitors from around the region. Communities across Colorado and the West that are looking for ways to help their downtowns thrive with business, entertainment, and culture should look to Fort Collins and historic Old Town Square as a shining example. Old Town has come a long way in the last 25 years. May the next 25 years of downtown Fort Collins and Old Town Square be filled with even more progress and prosperity. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce two of my favorite people. The dynamic duo is going to come together to make this Saturday Night Live presentation. First on the agenda is Peggy Reeves, who was on City Council for a term and then was also our state representative forever in the state of Fort Collins. That's who you think of as the state. Randy, you got a ways to go yet. The next part of this dynamic duo is Lucia Wiley, who, I know it's an oxymoron, is one of my favorite people as an attorney. But Lucia, of course, was a city attorney. She also has been in private practice and has served as a Downtown Development Authority's attorney ever since. And so she's now pushing some of that stuff off on Josh now. She spends more time in Estes Park. Regardless, please welcome Peggy and Lucia.
Well, we know that we can always count on Ed for the good comments, right? And don't be alarmed for those of you who know me to see my yellow legal pad notes, because I just can't talk without. I know, Kelly, I know. So anyway, Peggy and I are so happy to be here today. When a group of us got together a while back to talk about the need to do a celebration of the founders of this amazing downtown that we have today, it made sense to do it in connection with the 25th anniversary of Old Town Square, because this was the first major redevelopment project and because the square has such great significance to people in our community. But you know, Old Town Square did not just miraculously on its own spring into being in 1985. And what Peggy and I want to do today is kind of remind everybody that there was 10 years of hard work and literally hundreds of people before that time in 1985 that allowed this project to happen. And we were so fortunate in Fort Collins to have a group of city council and staff and community leaders and downtown owners that were willing to take some risks and step forward and create a vision, not just of one project, as great as this is, but for a whole downtown. That were willing to do the hard work, the committees, the hundreds of hours, the putting together the structure, so that when the right person and the right project came to town, it could happen. And that right person was Gene Mitchell, and the right project was Old Town Square. So there were really two critical points in time in the early downtown leadership. One in 1981 that was the culmination of many years of effort when the city council at the time, and actually there were two city councils because it straddled an election, when that city council created the Downtown Development Authority, and then the downtown owners voted it in and voted to put a tax on themselves to help launch this effort. And then the second one in 1985 with this project. And so we want to dedicate this celebration basically to the leaders at those two critical points in time when a failure of leadership could have meant a failed downtown and a very different community than the one we live in today. Peggy?
So I have the pleasure of recognizing the city officials and community leaders that made it happen way back in the earlier time first. So if those who are here would please be acknowledged, we will clap at the end. The DDA Planning Committee at the time had Art March, who was our former city attorney, George Braylig, who is still on the DDA board now, Chuck Mabry, and I saw Chuck, Steve Feaster, and Jim Woods. The city council members who were there at the time in '81 were Nancy Gray, Ellery Wilmarth, Chuck Bowling, me, Bert Cross, Lloyd St. Croix, and Earl Wilkinson. In addition, our city manager at the time was John Arnold, who is here. Lucia Wiley was our attorney, and the city clerk, and still city clerk, Wanda Krychek. In addition, after the '81 election, as Lucia mentioned, we had a new group of city council members come in. I was still on the council, and Ellery Wilmarth, but we had 5 new members: John Konezovich, Gary Castle, Bill Elliott, Jerry Horak, and John Clark. So those got to vote. I got to vote twice. Some of them just got to vote once. The first DDA board were Earl Wilkinson, Carl Carson, Art March, Tom Gleason, and John Konezovich. So could we give a round of applause for all of these people?
And before we leave our comments on that early batch of, now we're going to have a helicopter, a fountain, and the wind. I just have 2 quick remembrances that I want to mention. I remember being a very young city attorney in Fort Collins, and it was a city council downtown retreat at the DMA Plaza, which is a senior high-rise project still here, Remington and Olive. And I remember Earl Wilkinson, who was on the council at the time, standing on the top floor and looking out over Fort Collins. And he said, so choked up with emotion that I've remembered it 30 years, he looked out over the city and he said, this is the greatest city in the world. And he meant it. And this was at a time before any of the redevelopment had even happened. But he knew what we had, and he knew that it was worth preserving. The second one is just a brief comment about Art March. Art was a longtime city attorney. He was a native of Fort Collins. In fact, he grew up on Mountain Avenue. Art was humble but brilliant. You would never know this because he would never tell you, but he was #1 in his law school class at the University of Colorado that included legal luminaries that went on to state and national prominence. But Art would never have considered practicing anywhere but downtown Fort Collins. And he worked tirelessly in the early years to come up with a structure that would allow downtown to be what it is today. When that structure didn't exist, he helped write legislation that allowed for the creation of a downtown development authority. And then later on, he volunteered not as an attorney, but just as somebody who loved Fort Collins on many downtown committees and on the first DDA board. I mention these two not because they're the most important or the only important, but I mention them because they're good examples of the spirit we're celebrating today. The spirit that says we love downtown, but not just that, that we have to work. We have to work very hard to keep it a downtown that we can love. And so again, just a moment to honor people like Earl and Art, and today the others that continue to have that spirit for Fort Collins.
And the people that were on the city council back in 1985, when the dedication occurred 25 years ago, were John Knezovich, Gary Castle, Bill Elliott, Jerry Horak, John Clark, Barbara Rutstein, and Kelly Olson. In addition, the DDA board at the time in '85, Dave McCary, Barbara Schofield, Art March, Jim Reedhead, Earl Wilkinson, Ray Dixon, Tom Gleason, John Knezovich, Dan Larson, and Chuck Warner. So if we could just give a moment of applause for those folks who were here at the dedication. And we're happy so many of them can be here today. I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments. As Lucia mentioned, there were so many groups and so many people and organizations that worked on the downtown. I was elected in '73. One of the tragedies that occurred during the time that I was on the council was that J.C. Penney's left downtown. That was our last major retailer. We knew something had to be done. We had people working in terms of forming a historic district, which is also critical to one of the pieces of making this work. But then we had people that were willing to move forward and say, okay, are we really going to form a DDA or not? The city council had to vote on that to make it happen, and then the people in the downtown area had to ratify that with their votes. But we did that, we got it done, and we are so proud of what has happened. I really couldn't envision what has happened here back at that time, but it's just glorious. And I just want to say as a parting comment, every struggle, has moments where you just don't know what's going to happen. And every time you turned around, there was some controversy. Even putting trees in the downtown area was a controversy, if you can believe that or not. But, we wouldn't have the ambiance that we have here, the people that have worked on it, without those folks that we've all recognized today. So I think everyone who's here should take this as a celebration of their effort and what they want Fort Collins to be, what it is now 25 years later, and what it's probably going to be in another 25 years. It's up to us to make sure that that continues to happen. So thank you.
Peggy, actually, Castle was gone in '85. I was How soon they forget. As we all know, the Downtown Development Authority has been critical to this whole venue, and without them, of course, this wouldn't have happened. So to wrap up to the morning's event is our present chair of the Downtown Development Authority, Patty Spencer.
Thank you. On behalf of the current Downtown Development Authority Board of Directors, we're here today to honor the founders of Old Town Square and thank them for their hard work. But I would hope that this plaque also serves as a reminder to current and future citizens of Fort Collins that ideas turn into vision, vision turns into possibility, possibility turns into action, and action changes communities. Thank you very much. Drum roll.
You can all step up and read it afterwards. I can't read it from here, but I know it's a very nice plaque. Just want to remind everybody that from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock tonight, there's a real happening of the 80s. Wear your 80s clothes. Tom, you can just wear what you got on. And then there's going to be a special thing if you can make it here at 6 o'clock, because there's going to be a special dance review out here. It'll be kind of fun to watch. But there will be music, entertainment, that whole 5 hours. So come when you can. And for those of you who are VIPs, and I think that's most of you sitting in this center row, except for Tom again, of course, is that we're invited over to Cooper Smith's for some more meet and greet and for lunch, and a special Cooper Smith's 25th anniversary special beverage. So thank you for all coming. Enjoy the day. Thank you.